Hello and welcome to Moods and Tea, and as we continue our look at female directors of note, journey now takes us to A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. But of course, I'm your host as always, Elwood Jones, and joining me of course is our own skateboarding, welding fashionista, Miss Kim Lowe.
I wish. Hello.
As I said already, we are going to be looking at A Girl Walks We're going to watch A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night by a director whose name I can never pronounce. I don't know if you want to have a go at tackling this one, Kim.
Anna Lily Amirpour?
Yeah, it's the last part that always throws off, but certainly a director who, with this film, exploded onto the scene with a very unique voice, as she gave us what has been touted as Iran's first vampire movie. Since then, she went on to direct The Bad Batch for Netflix, a film starring Jason Momoa and almost an unrecognisable Jim Carrey, alongside Keanu Reeves doing his cool hipster thing. But A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, when we were compiling the list of films that we wanted to talk about, this was one of the films that I personally wanted to put across, because it's a film that I put off when it initially came out, because I thought, oh my god, this is just like really sort of art school nonsense, and I saw The Bad Batch and just kind of became obsessed with this director the more I sort of learned about her. And in particular, of listening to the interview that she did with Elijah Wood on his Spectrovision podcast, who obviously are responsible for putting this film out. And Spectrovision, if you're not aware, is a production company owned by Elijah Wood. It's one of the smaller of the big horror sort of labels at the moment, because we obviously have the likes of A27 and Blumhouse Productions, and then obviously we got Spectrovision, who not only give Elijah Wood a reason to do quirky horror projects, but also have been responsible not only for this film, but also for recruiting Richard Stanley from the wilds of wherever he was been hiding out since Hardware, to obviously come back into the fold and bring us a colour from outer space. But, Kim, I mean, was this a film you'd seen before, or this the first time watch for yourself as well?
This is a first time watch for me. I mean, it's been a movie that's been on my list for a while, but I'm kind of those people which it takes a little, like, convincing, I guess, sometimes to get into, I don't know, just foreign movies. Foreign, like, I just don't know the language at all.
Yeah. It's sometimes good to just sort of like just push yourself off that cliff at times and like force yourself into these wonderful situations. And I think certainly one of the advantages of this show is that we can do such things to ourselves and give ourselves an excuse to look at these sorts of films. But the film is set in the Iranian ghost town known as Bad City, where the local riverbed is dried out and now filled with bodies, and has really become almost a ghost town filled with drug dealers and prostitutes and the lost alike. As it's here that we're introduced to Arash, who has been tasked with taking care of his heroin addicted father Hossein, and at the same time has to deal with the local drug dealer named Saeed, who a number of situations leads Arash to encounter the local vampire, who known only as the Girl, who spends her nights skateboarding for the city, harassing the residents and generally preying on the bad men of the city for her blood fix. And it's through this chance encounter that Arash invokes and this very unusual and unlikely relationship as the two find a way to discover what's been missing from their lives. Certainly a very art house sort of movie and a very sort of abstract and minimalistic film. This is she sees Amirpour very much working in the same sort of style that we've seen from the likes of Greg Araki, and certainly for some films from like Sofia Coppola, such as Somewhere. But yeah, I mean, opening thoughts on this one. I mean, this is certainly one of the more trickier films, I would say, for us to look at in a critical sense, and Especially, I think it brings us back to the similar sort of issues we had when we looked at certain Sofia Coppola movies. As this is a movie where not a lot happens, and when describing it might not sound like the most interesting movie, but at the same time, for myself at least, it was a very fascinating experience.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think as with everybody, art house movies are very... It can lean either way, pretty much most of the time. But this one is really good. I mean, when you look at it visually, with the black and white and using those different tones to build the story, visually it's an absolute experience. It uses it to build the atmosphere. It uses it to kind of create the girl's character, and that kind of subtlety and that kind of, I don't know, unsettling feeling that she has as she's harassing these people that probably with color it might not have felt the same. At the same time, you have this kind of, I don't know, maybe you have this whole story with just the city itself. You get such a good idea of what it is, and I guess just all these characters that we have. And it's really interesting because when you look at, say, IMDb, these people, these different characters are pretty much, other than Arash himself, they're mostly known for the roles that they play, like the prostitute, the pimp, the whatever, the junkie. And they're all nothing very good. They're not good people, pretty much. There's nothing good linked to them. But at the same time, this is just like, when we were looking at Kronos and Guillermo del Toro had a different take on a vampire movie in that case. I think that Ana Lily Amirpour, definitely, she had a different view of, say, crafting this vampire movie, and it's different because it's not bloody. It's not, you don't see that gore, you don't see that sort of all the blood and gore that you would usually get in a vampire movie. But at the same time, you have this kind of like sleazy kind of world where, say, I think the best comparison would be, in the black and white sense, would be something like Quentin Tarantino's Sin City, right? Yeah, Robert Rodriguez's Sin City. So you have this different... So you have that kind of comparison where it feels like, especially because, that one's called Sin City, this one's Bad City. So you kind of have that, you kind of draw these different connections with the people. And as all these characteristics kind of come together, the story really comes together like that. And, it's just, I honestly think the best thing about this is the camera work. The camera work is fantastic with how she focuses it, and some scenes on the sides are blurry and then some are completely in focus. Sometimes it's just like a still camera and then the people are moving through it. It's really, really nice. Like I don't know what else I can say about it.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly with the fact, you said already, it was shot in black and white, and it joins that sort of small group of movies where they were intentionally shot in black and white, such as like Joss Whedon's adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing and The Artist. Films that choose to shoot in this artistic style rather than following the trend that we've seen now, where you have films released in colour, such as like Logan and Mad Max Fury Road, and then they get the chrome treatment. And even Parasite recently got a black and white cut, and I was like, why would you release Parasite in a black and white cut? It makes no sense at all. But this film, as I said, it sets out to intentionally should be shot in black and white, and it's, in many ways, it's an homage to the 1922 German expressionist film Nosferatu, which certainly this vampire takes more of its cues from, even though it's not anywhere sort of like grotesque. It's this beautiful rockabilly-esque woman who, as I said, she wears a headdress and skateboards at night, and she blends very much in with the city. She's not got this sort of timelessness to her character. She's not like lived 1,000 years or seen like 1,000 things that we'd expect from the vampire mythos. Here we have a character who's very much in tune with the world around her and could very much recently have been like turned like last week. She doesn't have that sort of like tonelessness to her sort of character, but certainly Nosferatu is a big sort of inspiration to her, along with more interestingly, the spaghetti westerns of Sergio Leone. This idea of like the mysterious lone anti-hero with vigilante streaks. So she certainly takes many interesting sort of routes for this character. And for myself, I'm not a huge vampire fan when it comes to horror, and I'm always more interested if you're doing vampires that you do something different. You give me a new spin that I've not seen before, and you be it like the nomadic vampires of Near Dark, or if we're looking at any sort of like the vampire movies which try to break away from just, dusty castles and bad accents, and basically the same sort of vampires that we saw with like Christopher Lee. So, give me like Lost Boys, or just some sort of modern twist on it. And I think that's what I really like about the vampire that we see here, even though the vampire sort of element is very much played back. It only really sort of shows itself when she decides to feed, and even then it's not sort of like this drawn out thing. It's more like a primal hunting thing rather than something that's sort of like drawn out for like sort of the horror of based around the anticipation of the act being carried out.
Yeah, and I think one of the main things of what really works for her character is the girl is basically a huge contrast. Obviously, the way that she interacts with, say, because she's generally a quiet character. She doesn't really say much at all throughout the entire movie. And the only time you see her really interact is one time when she's scaring the little kid into being a good boy, which was a very entertaining scene. Might have been one of my favorites. And then there was also, the interaction she has with Arash. But at the same time, when she turns into her full-blown, just being a vampire, it's probably not as... It's scary in the sense when you first happens, because her teeth just kind of like come out really quickly, abruptly. And it just goes like, shh, and then it just comes out. And then all of a sudden, it's like she has this look on her face that changes. And I really think that the actress did a fantastic job of just having being able to emote through her facial expressions so well, to just have that sudden change and really see that she is quite a lethal person. So it's a big contrast to when she's outside or when she's just walking around. But I mean, even her getup, like her whole headdress and long flowing, I don't know what you call it.
I would say, yeah, we'll say shawl.
Something like that. It goes all the way to the ground, and she's just like, it's just like a black and white figure. And then she's just slowly walking down the street. And then whenever I think one of the creepy moments is when she's just appearing suddenly in the background. And then she's like blurry in the background or whatever. And in those harassing moments where she's just going after these different people that she is, there's this really huge unsettling feeling, because suddenly she'll be gone, and then suddenly she'll just be following them. And it seems that every single encounter, she treats it a little differently, and it's done in a little different way. And that gives it a little bit of this, it's just really fresh to watch, because it's not just like a repetitive act.
No, not at all. I mean, it's really the people that she preys upon, they're always the bad people, such as when she preys on the pimp at the beginning. And I mean, the whole vampire act has got more in common with a snake, especially with the suddenly expanding fangs, than it does with like the more traditional sort of vampire sort of attack. These aren't just like frenzied bloody attacks or just like these seductive moves. It's just basically she uses her feminine charms to allow her access into the situations, and then if she chooses to feed, then she just does with such sudden ferocity. And we see it. There's a scene where she feeds on a homeless man, and you see her sort of like sway back and forth, and then it's like suddenly strikes in on this guy. It's no sort of like seductiveness to it. It is just such a primal urge to feed, but she's trained herself just to basically feed on the bad people. But I mean, she's also fortunate, as I said, she's in Bad City where nobody really seems to exist. It's almost like this limbo sort of state that people are constantly in. I mean, the fact, as we said already, the dried riverbed is just full of bodies, as we see in the beginning, and it was kind of humorous that we see Arash, and he's sort of like walking the street, and he picks up this cat that he finds, and he's walking over the bridge, and you like look out into the background, and there's just like all these bodies that are just like lining the riverbank, and it's completely doesn't faze him at all. He just carries on walking with this like adorable cat that he's just found.
And it's the craziest thing because the cat has quite a lot of movie time, screen time.
It does.
And it's in reality, you think about it, the key is in the cat, right? In the end, what pulls everything together is the cat's existence and where it happens to show up, right? So I mean, I would assume both of us, I think since we have studio cats, we're both cat people. I honestly like seeing cats in movies when they're not being harmed.
I was surprised the cat made it to the end. I thought there's a couple of moments where this cat is not gonna make it to the end credit, but it managed to hang in there. This wide-eyed thing that it is. But yeah, it's kind of interesting, as I said, with the girl being as detached as she is, with the sort of interaction she has, yet at the same time so connected to the world around her. Like we see her when she's in her apartment and she's doing her makeup and she's dancing to records, and she has all these connections to like pop culture, and at the same time her actual connections with humanity are very she's very detached, as we like when she meets the prostitute, and she's like follows her home, and somehow she ends up back at this prostitute's house, and she's like almost fascinated by the humanity of these people, and it's just like this woman who, because of her life that she's choosing to live, is now sort of so detached as well that she feels no desire for anything, and it sort of like fascinates this vampire that she doesn't prey on her at all. She doesn't feel pity. She just sort of like has this fascination with her story before she like moves off back out into the night, and essentially I would zoom onto the next encounter really for her. So, but how did you find her relationship with Arash? Because like everything in this film, it's not a traditional sort of romance. I mean, they originally meet and he's dressed as Dracula. And they have this weird seduction scene where he pierces her ears, and they sort of dance to this song on the radio while they connect over like the importance of sad songs. All of these things that are such like real sort of art house film student pretentiousness that they could be shown at, yet at the same time the way that she directs it is just so engaging. I didn't really care the fact that so much of this scene is not really about anything at all. It's just scenes that can be shot just because they're pretty to look at. So I didn't feel that I needed like all this sort of like substance and like and storyline. I was just happy just following these characters around and watching them just do what they do. It was just really so engaging, and just like having a movie wash over you. Yet at the same time, I was so glad that I was watching it by myself, because if I'd subjected someone else to this, I would just be like so distracted, constantly looking over and going, are they bored? Are they not getting this? I mean, how are they feeling? It's the worst situation to be in when you watch something like this with someone else.
Well, I think obviously I'm gonna address the Arash and the girl situation in a bit, but talking about like I think as people who are pretty much film buffs, and we watch a lot of movies and a big range of movies, our acceptance of movies are a little bit more than other people. So to ask someone to watch artsy fartsy movies are very, very hard, because most of the time the association is going to be slow and boring. And, every once in a while there will be like a gem that someone will absolutely love, but sometimes it's a little hard. I mean, especially even if you're talking about Spectre Vision, which acquires really great movies, and they make really great movies in general. But but you know, there's a lot of quirkiness to the things that they release in general. And I mean, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is definitely one where if you told anybody the title, they'll be like, "What?" Is that supposed to be interesting? You know, you'd hesitate a little, right? I remember when I first heard of this movie, I had no idea it was a vampire movie. I thought it was just like some crap drama. and then I decided, when I saw it on Shudder, I realized I was incredibly wrong. But yeah, I mean, if we go back to, you know, the movie, Arash and the girl, their relationship is not the, you know, it's obviously not typical. And I think for both of them, what they really are looking for is this connection. Because for her, she's alone. She's pretty much, you know, she's a vampire. She can't be with anybody else. She's just going to want to eat them at one point. But then, on the other hand, Arash has a really tough life also. I think getting the cat was kind of like companionship for him in some ways. Kind of like a buffer in the home with his junky dad. But at the same time, when he meets this girl, they don't really know each other that well, and she kind of rejects him all the time. The only thing she's done is accept the earrings and lets him pierce her ears. And then she kind of walks off, you know? So it's kind of weird how he feels this connection with this girl, knowing nothing about her. And then in the end, it's kind of like the ultimate decision, right? Whether of what he's going to do.
Yes, I mean, certainly the film does that wonderful thing of putting her in this real sort of tricky position of, like, does he accept her for what she is? Or does he ultimately reject her? Because, I mean, obviously, it comes down to not what she has done. It's just more about what she is. I found this is my sort of reading of the film, not to obviously try and spoil too much.
But the thing is, is it really because the only thing she said is, "You don't know what I've done," right?
Yes.
And then he realizes that, you know, she's obviously the person who's responsible for a death, pretty much close to him.
Yes.
And at that point, what do we think about is all he knows is that she killed someone. He doesn't know that she's a vampire. He still at this point doesn't know she's a vampire.
Yeah, I mean, the fact you could just say the fact that she's a killer in that respect.
Yeah,
then, I mean, you can certainly look at that. But at the same time, he even says that he's got his own questionable past, which we obviously know of because of his involvement in the local drug trade and sort of with the local prostitutes as well. I mean, you mentioned already, I mean, his father, here played by Marshall Manish, who the wonderful character actor that he is, and it was kind of interesting to see him do a serious role, because I've constantly seen him like turn up in things such as like How I Met Your Mother, where he played the taxi driver, and he was in Will and Grace, and he's in been quite a number of like the American sitcoms. He's also in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies as well. So he's one of these actors who constantly turns up places. I mean, he was also in True Lies, which I didn't realize until we started looking into this film, because I saw him and I was like, why do I know this actor from somewhere? And it's all like, I don't watch a lot of Iranian cinema, so it can't be that. And then I realized, oh wait, he was the taxi driver in How I Met Your Mother. And here he is, obviously doing in a role which reminded me, and I don't, again, if you don't watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, this analogy might be lost to you, but certainly when I look at Arash and his father, it reminded me of like basically the this film's version of Charlie and Frank from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I mean, certainly with Hussein, you mentioned, I mean, he's a heroin junkie, he's an absolute mess of a parent, and then you've got Arash, who's basically trying to keep it all together. He feels obviously the responsibility because of him being his father, and at the same time tries to he feels that he can somehow save his father, especially when Saeed is removed from the picture, and Arash gets to essentially just pick up his turf. You get this feeling that because he now controls like the drugs trade for the town, that he's somehow going to be able to save his father, which ultimately doesn't prove to be the case. As we have that very weird sequence of where he first off throws his father out, and then his father engages in a needle sharing experiment with Atisi, the prostitute who appears, and it's just kind of interesting that we have like 5 characters and how they go in and out of each other's life. You see like a character like appear in one person's story and then in someone else's, and just how these 5 characters' lives interlink with each other is very fascinating to watch as the film unfolds. How awkward was that heroin sequence for you?
The one with the prostitute?
Yeah, I mean, they're sharing needles, which is just maybe sketchy as all hell.
Yeah, but it's also the fact that he's kind of forcing himself on her.
I know.
You know, like, it's not... He's in this weird world. Like, he has this... I don't know if he's feeling like he's being haunted by his wife or something like that. And then he sees, like, this woman that is that he thinks is his wife or looks like his wife or something. I don't know what it is. There has some connection with this character with his wife, and I just don't know what it is. But I mean, that scene was, you know, it kind of like, before he was just a sad, pathetic junkie and dad, and then that moment turned him into a bad guy. You know, like, he was genuinely a bad guy, you know? And, you know, all of a sudden it really felt like I don't know what we were supposed to feel in that scene. Are you supposed to feel bad for him? Or are you supposed to feel, you know, like he's a really shitty human being?
He is certainly a really shitty human being. I think it's basically by him committing such an act, he essentially puts himself in the feeding pile for the girl. Yeah. So we have to see him being this shitty person, because it's not enough for him just to be a junkie. He has to be a shitty person to fall into sort of her criteria. Because this thing, because the girl just randomly appears out of nowhere to attack him. And it's...
Well, I wouldn't say... You know, there's this weird thing, is I start wondering if the cat had something to do with it. Like, is it like she can sense it through the cat or something? Because the cat was there, right?
The cat's always there, yeah, certainly.
Like, you had this, like, interestingly, like, this, I think it was at that moment we had that close focus of the cat and the cat's face. And then all of a sudden, we had her walking down the street. She turns around, looks at this building, and then she's like... And then she's inside, you know? And then she's attack type of thing. So, I don't know. I don't know, like... But that's the thing, is there's a lot of the story which kind of, like, is a mystery in how it connects together and how it all works. But I feel like there's something more that we're supposed to catch in there. Maybe little clues that... like, maybe that's been missed because it's our first viewing or something like that. I don't know. I mean, it's a foreign language film, so there's a lot of things that I feel while I'm reading the subtitles I've missed, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's... I mean, this is the thing with Amirpour's works. I mean, because they're so heavily stylized, and that she's so sort of focused on, like, mixing and meshing of cultural backgrounds and genres, I think at times these worlds she creates have got such depth to them. They got all these layers to them that it sometimes takes a couple of watches to sort of untangle it all. And I think suddenly we're sort of in this privileged position of being able to, you know, sit down and drink tea and discuss these movies, which sometimes I think you need in films like this and Dogtooth. You occasionally need to, like, sit down and go, okay, so I wasn't the only one confused by this. Let's break this down, and by doing that, you kind of often, like, appreciate a film even more, or at least be able to sort of untangle all the many parts at play here. But yeah, certainly with the cat, I mean, as I said, the cat's like this ever-present character in this this story. And with the, obviously by having the girl choose to feed on that particular character, I mean, it obviously creates this level of conflict, because obviously we have someone close to Arash because it's his father who's been fed, and at the same time he's now got this he's got this situation where the girl he's into has essentially killed his father, and it creates this sort of like this conflict, which obviously the end of the film kind of hinges on. But yeah, it's like, I mean, as I said, it's like that sad songs scene where they're hanging around outside the power plant, where Rash and the girl are having a discussion about the sad songs, and so then when we have the heroin sequence, it's shot in almost sort of like slow motion. It's so interesting to look at, and at the same time kind of horrifying, the fact that you've got someone being forced into embark on this heroin trip with someone because that they feel it's going to somehow create this connection that they want. So but yeah, it was certainly it was unnerving. I think I said the fact it's just the people sharing needles, it's like, oh my god. Because we're used to people obviously shooting up heroin, but we're not used to people seeing like junkies sharing needles. It's like, no, that's sketchy.
Another thing that was really good about the movie, I think, was at least for me, was I thought the soundtrack was amazing, like amazing. It added so much to the movie. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, certainly music is a huge part of her sort of style, and she builds it like Tarantino. She builds her films around music, and she takes it with whereas Tarantino, it's all about, you know, creating this idea, a sense of place and setting, and what music goes with these particular scenes. It's for herself, it's really sort of inspires, like, you know, the outfit a character might wear, like what the music that a certain character would listen to. And certainly in the case of the girl or the woman, however you wish to choose to her, the fact that she adopts this almost this rockabilly sort of style because of the music that she's into. And I think, again, it was still kind of fascinating watching a vampire do her makeup and go through this whole sort of like very normal sort of routine, rather than in other vampire movies we've seen where they never seem to put such time into their appearance, yet they turn up sort of like immaculately turned out at all times. So to see this, as I said, to see these like really gorgeously shot sequences of her doing like eye makeup or dancing like in her room to records and stuff, it's just really, it's things that were just like so engaging on this unexplainable sort of level. And I think to really sort of enjoy this film, and much like The Bad Batch, I think it's one of those films that's like best to just like wash over you, rather than just sit there and question like what's supposed to be happening. And I think if you start questioning what's happening every 5 minutes, you're going to sort of like pick up on the fact there's sort of lack of story, and it's going to sort of unravel more. Whereas if you just like go with the flow and just enjoy what you've been shown, I think you enjoy it a lot more. Certainly for myself, at least, that's how I approached it. So it makes it a little more difficult because it's one of the films that you now could then create like the perfect sort of time to watch it. Like, you can't watch it when you got people like clanging and banging around you and stuff. It's like, just give me 5 minutes bloody peace, people. Or like the cat needs something, or your kids need something. You can't appreciate this film because it's a film that demands such attention from yourself, just from how arresting its visuals are. But to constantly be snapped back into your not so exciting reality is a bit distracting, to say the least.
A lot of times, I think, with movies like this, it's really just a viewing experience. You have to kind of let it embody you, wash over you, kind of really be engaged in it. And it's not hard to really, be pulled into this one. I mean, that's coming from me. I'm not a big fan of black and white movies, even if it's deliberate. I really don't like. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of black and white movies in general. I know that about myself because I recently watched a black and white movie, which everybody loves, and I don't. But I'm reviewing it soon, so I'm not going to say it now.
Okay.
But although it's going to be out by the time this this podcast goes up, I believe. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, this movie is interesting. I think it's intriguing. Soundtrack is good. There's a lot of things that I think the execution was done really well in the balance of how it's all executed. I mean, like we were talking about, soundtrack choice is really good. But when there's no soundtrack, there's really nothing. It's really just quiet.
Yes.
Dead air.
It very much matches the atmosphere of this town. I mean, as I said, this is a desolate ghost town.
Exactly.
So
there's like this ghost town, this isolation, this lonely vibe, this unsettling, unnerving feeling that just is like something bad is going to happen. Something bad is going to happen, but when is it going to happen type of thing. And you really do feel it that way. I mean, I'm no, like, I just like you. I mean, I'm not, this is probably one of, maybe I've watched another Iranian movie at one point. I can't remember it right now. But, like, this is the one I think this is my first one, if it isn't. So,
it's not a
like, I don't know how these movies are generally, you know, I don't really know how these movies are, Iranian movies are generally done and the vibes that they give, you know. So, but I mean, judging from this one, I would definitely be interested in seeing how other Iranian movies are done in that sense, you know, like what other movies they have to offer.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when it comes to Iranian cinema, and it's not one of those like areas of foreign cinema that sort of like leaps out at you that people are sort of excited about. It's not like you know, like French, German, or Asian cinema where we've got this idea of what style and subjects are sort of popular within the sort of field. So it's kind of interesting in that respect. I mean, it's given us different actors, it's given us different locations and ideas to play around with. But at the same time, I think when you look at Amirpour and her work, I mean, she's so individual as a director. It's hard to like look at this as an example of Iranian cinema, because I mean, here we have a director who is kind of baffled by the idea of people wanting to apply feminist theory to her films. If people want to, she openly says, I mean, she is kind of reserved to applying feminist thought to her films. If people want to obviously apply that sort of ideas to her films, she said they're more than welcome, but it's not the way that I create the films. Even going to cite that when Tarantino made Kill Bill, did people say he was being a feminist? It's weird. I wonder, like, oh, a female, and she's so battling misogyny. So she's very much someone who walks to her own beat. And she's also has this obsession with outcasts in particular, as we see with both this film and The Bad Batch. It's all about, all her characters are basically these sort of outcasts, these people finding their way in these worlds. And I just like the fact that she just does what she wants to do, and she's in that sort of fortunate situation where she's able to do it, yet at the same time not make it completely sort of so that it pushes out the audience, as you know, the likes of like someone like David Lynch's work does, where it's so sort of out there. With Amirpour, it's very much in more the line with like the likes of Greg Araki, where we're being shown these worlds of outcasts and surreal imagery, but at the same time it's still got that familiarity to still keep us drawn into the story. And I'm just really interested to see where she goes next. I mean, she's obviously working on a female-centered remake of Cliffhanger, and she has another film which has been delayed called Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon, which is currently been delayed due to the COVID, I believe, at the moment. So at the moment it's still stuck in that sort of release hell at the moment. So hopefully we'll see a release of that at some point soon. So, but I mean, have you seen The Bad Batch?
I haven't. It's on my list. I keep thinking about it, and then I skip over it every
Okay.
time.
I know there's people out there who didn't like it, but then again, people didn't like this movie as well. So I don't know. It's hard to say. We're like, just because you like this film, would you like that film as well? But I know I certainly like The Bad Batch, but again, this could be like a whole other sort of wormhole you go down. Because I mean, the amount of arguments I've created defending Southland Tales, and people have told me how wrong I am on that one. But I think to that extent, I kind of want to also put Richard Kelly in the same sort of filmmaking category as Amirpour, although Richard Kelly is again someone who's very much of his own thing, as we obviously saw with Donnie Darko, as we've discussed on the show before. So, yeah, is there anything else you want to bring up on this one?
No, I'm done.
Okay. If you wanted to get a taste of Amirpour's film taste, though, she had top 10 picks from the Criterion Film Collection, including Mulholland Drive by David Lynch, The Fisher King by Terry Gilliam, All Hatta Balthazar by Robert Bresson, Antichrist by Lars von Trier, Days Confused by Richard Linklater, Being John Malkovich by Spike Jonze, Repulsion by Polanski, Fantastic Mr. Fox by Wes Anderson, which is really random, Repo Man by Alex Cox, which I would certainly put as being a big inspiration for this film. It's so the same sort of outlaw filmmaking there, and God Created Woman by Roger Vadim, which I think in many ways you can get the idea of the sort of directors whose works that she admires and certainly who inspire her at all. But I think when it comes to Amirpour, she's one of those directors I'm glad is out there making films, and I just wish that she was making more frequently so I could enjoy escaping to these worlds more. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. What were your final thoughts on this one? Did you enjoy this one? Would you recommend it? Or
Definitely recommend it. I mean, but I mean, I think it's a cautious recommending, because it's like we talked about. This is an art house movie, so it's subtle, it's quiet, it's slow. Not a whole lot happens, but there is stuff happening. It's a lot of anticipation, a lot of style, but I would say there's still quite a bit of substance. So I think it really tests a little bit of the audience's patience and how much you appreciate, I guess, art house movies in general. But I mean, if you like art house movies, then this is definitely one that I would recommend.
That's good. Do you want to chance with further watching for what you'd recommend to go with this?
I mean, further watching. I mean, right away, the first thing that came to my mind was Let the Right One In.
Oh yeah, that's a good choice.
Swedish film. I mean, if not, I mean, I haven't seen the Swedish version, but I figured the original was a better one to pair. But I mean, the U.S. remake was really good too. Let Me In. Both of them are great pairings, I would think.
Yeah.
It has a very similar, I think, feeling to it, in the sense that it is something of a romance vampire type of story, I think. But I mean, other than that, I mean, I talked about it. If you wanted to have something that's based in a kind of city that's not too good, would be Sin City would be one that I would pair with it as well. It's a little bit more, different type of style, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's generally what I would say. And I mean, I thought about maybe Interview with the Vampire might be a good one to pair with it, but I'm not sure. I haven't fully convinced myself yet.
Okay, that's fine. For myself, I mean, obviously watched The Bad Batch, which she obviously directed as well. It's her take on, as she describes it, it's like Pink Flamingos meets The Road Warrior. Take away from that what you want. Certainly in terms of other films to watch as well, Repo Man by Alex Cox is also a really fantastic pairing with this film. I also want to, the part of me that just constantly wants to bring it back to Tigers Aren't Afraid. I just think this would be really interesting to pair those two films together. Other than that, I would look at Greg Araki's Doom Generation or Noah, just for the more for the world building. I think that they exist in very similar sort of worlds to this film, so even if those worlds are sort of like more tinged to like 90s neon, then this film's obviously draped in like expressionist cinema, black and white. So, but yeah, I think this is a film that I would understand if you hated this as much as if you came to me and said you enjoyed it. So I think whichever way you choose to view this film, I think you're right either way. So it's perhaps not for all taste, but one that I think is worth checking out and approach with minimal expectation. Just don't go into expecting anything, and you'll probably come away more rewarded. But that brings us obviously to the end of tonight's episode. Thank you as always for listening. You can obviously check out full archive episodes at moviesandtpodcast.wordpress.com. And whether you happen to be liking to us, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons, and maybe leave us a review, as it all helps raise the profile of the show. You can follow us on both on Facebook and Instagram, and we really appreciate any sort of feedback that you wish to leave us on the show. But Kim, where are we going next in our season of noteworthy female directors?
Well, we're moving forward to 2016, and we're looking at a French horror film, Raw, directed by Julia Ducournau.
Yes, we're going to be looking into some body horror in many ways, as we look at this really incredible French film, which I think when it came out had a lot of critics very excited, as along with horror fans as well. And as a young vegetarian veterinary surgeon through a hazing experiment discovers herself with taste for meat. And we're just going to leave it at that. This is a film which goes in some very interesting directions indeed. But all that's to obviously come up on our next episode. But thank you as well for listening. Thank you to my co-host Kim. And we'll be back next time to discuss Raw. Until then.